I just realized I had my OBS didn't turn on my mic for some reason. But yeah, you're welcome for the tutorial. Feel free to ask any questions. This context is just gonna be in the scope of primarily like single stories, starting or generally Ophilia, since it's the simplest one for people to get into. But I can answer pretty much any questions about any other single stories or like any full game or half categories. Well, I'm a little less experienced with half categories, but I can probably read the notes and give you a general understanding of what happens. But we're going to be running this on the PC version. You'll see I have a controller here. You can actually, for PC, you can use your keyboard, but since we have Switch gamers in here, I will be focusing on using only the controller here. This is a PS4 controller, but you can just pretend this is a Switch controller because they're basically the same layout. Never seen anyone play this before. Well, we are gonna speedrun, quote-unquote speedrunning, and be going fast, so you won't see much plot. Yeah, so half categories are considered like any categories that only complete 4 out of the 8 single stories. So that's generally like all rogues, all nobles, all males, all females. So I'll be focused. So we'll be going to go to the settings here. So these game options will apply to anything. You can choose your text language, which, by the way, is not available on Switch because it's based on your Switch language. I'm just gonna choose English because I understand English, but if you can choose whatever language you want for the text, it doesn't matter. So for the voices, you'll generally want for categories, especially like on single story, Japanese. Because there's some single stories, especially any single story featuring Haunted, where the voice lines like take forever, and voice lines basically kind of like in a battle, people will play the characters will play their voice lines, and in Haunted it's really slow in English. And for some characters, it's like it wavers between slow and fast. So for Ulbrich, the opposite is true because English is actually faster for Ulbrich, but most people will choose Japanese or English. But since I'm a rebel and this is Ophilia Single Story, you can technically Japanese is only like very slightly faster, but I did my PB in English and I'm a rebel, so we'll be doing English. So your message speed, you obviously want it to be quick because we're going fast. No, it's just generally when the battle starts, somebody will say something. And the battle doesn't start until they finish saying whatever. So, vibration... I don't know if this is on the Switch, but... So, actually, Tressa is not easier, because you have to think on your feet more. So, for Tressa, you have to think on your feet more for Omar and Esmeralda. Because those are not scripted fights. For Ophilia, pretty much nearly all the fights are scripted in Thief's Shrine route. Like the only fight that is not scripted in Ophilia Single Story is Matthias, and it's once you know what happens in your second turn, first turn, it's entirely scripted. But Tressa is not scripted because Omar, you need to think about your turn order for Omar, because Omar is an example of a boss that can go wrong if you just do whatever is listed on there. And Esmeralda, especially with 3 character, past turn 3 or so, it's scripted, but it's very RNG. So other good single stories that you can do is Alphen. Alphen is pretty simple as well. The only boss that you need to watch out for is Vanessa. But if you practice Vanessa, it's pretty straightforward. And Ogre Eagle, while it's a long fight and it's kind of based on what happens on turn 1, it's also straightforward, and Miguel is completely scripted. Like, no joke. So Therion's also, ironically, a good single story to start out with, because it pretty much only it's extremely linear, aside from the 3% steal. Like, Orlick is largely scripted, Gareth is largely scripted past turn 1, and Darius, after you get past turn, or assuming you survive, it's entirely scripted. Like, it only goes one way with Therion. So Therion's ironically another single story, but generally new people won't do it because 3% steal is kind of frustrating, and it's totally understandable. So Honnet's another okay choice, but you generally newbies will have a much more difficult time with the 3-character route as opposed to the 4-character route because Red Eye is a very dynamic, very dynamic boss, and there's a ton of different scripts that you need to understand based on what happens during the fight. So, but Honnet first and second, chapter 2 and 3 boss entirely scripted. Suikoden? I've never played Suikoden. Also, thanks for the raid, Zero. I think you're doing more Suikoden, whatever it's called, Suikoden tactics. Hope it went well. Someone said Sekuden or Suikoden. I don't know. I just interpreted it as Suikoden. So Ophilia Kate saves around 2 minutes over the non-Kate route, but I'm just gonna say if you're gonna do Ophi Kate, you should only be doing it if you're intending to contest the world record. Because it's very grind heavy. Like, extremely grind heavy. Yo, 32-minute PB? Let's go, we're gaming. Like, in optimal cases, it saves you 2 minutes because you skip Whistlewood, you recruit Cyrus later, which saves you the long Russell fight. And you get to do exploration really early. And you can't kill Kate's if you get Flurry Man, and he hits 4 times, or you get 2 turns on the Kate and kill it. Okay, so I'm just gonna briefly explain Kate's, because I don't want them to be in the scope of a new runner, because Kate's are generally intended to be advanced speedruns for those who are looking to basically be a top runner or attain really good times, but Kates are basically these cute little cats that you'll murder in different ways depending on the character, and it unlocks the ability to do alternate routes or much faster routes for a character. So, for example, Tressa Single Story, there's a route entirely dedicated to a Kate, because the non-Kate version of... Because when you kill a Kate, you gain a lot of levels, and you gain around 140 JP, which gives you enough to learn evasive maneuvers once you get to a Scholar Shrine. So, basically, with that, you can unlock a much faster route, but unfortunately, Kates are only 3% to spawn, and you only have like a limited number of encounters depending on the character that you decide to grind the Kate on before you have to reset. Like, Kates and some characters are generally kind of a commit to it thing, especially, for example, Tressa Kate, where you have to commit to going all the way through skipping Cyrus. And yeah, Kates, you generally want to kill them in the first turn because they have a good chance of running away. It's pretty rare that they don't run away. But anyhow, so... yeah, that's it for Kate. If you get a Kate, like, during your Whistlewood grind, like, it just lets you skip Whistlewood. It's really good, but definitely not necessary, especially if you're new. So, I don't know if Vibration's on the Switch, but I just disable it because I hate it. And so this is generally preference, but honestly, Revert to Original is generally faster because you never do the same action like twice in a row. Like for a large majority of the fights. The only place where changing to Remember can be faster is Haunted, because there's a lot of repeated actions, but for the most part, I recommend Revert to Original. But if there's some runners who do very good with this setting, but personally, I just use this. So we're gonna go to so this is a PC only thing. Well, actually, I think this might be... I don't know if this is on the Switch, but... I'm playing on a controller. So, these are the controller settings, and... So this is generally for any keyboard gamers. You can change this. I personally recommend changing some of the things like dash travel or skip, which is bound it, or cancel, which aka skip, which is bound to your backspace. You should bind it to something closer. So I just use the default settings primarily for this. I don't really use keyboard, except for if I mash E and X, which is the A button on here. But honestly, it's whatever you're comfortable with. I only use the keyboard arrow movements for performing buffer glitches, which I will explain much later, but it's not in the context of most single stories except for Ulbrich. Yeah, non-remember is just better because you never really repeat any actions. So basically, these settings is just what I use. So if you're running, especially anybody that uses Ha in it, you're gonna want voices in Japanese, 100%, because you're probably gonna regret it if you don't. So we use RTA. We don't have a load remover for Octopath because I think people have found out like it's pretty much the load times are pretty much the same, even if you have a really potato computer, like a ridiculously potato computer. I'm gonna choose to run in English because I'm an English voices gamer, so... So for this tutorial, we'll be focusing on Ophilia Single Story. So we'll be focusing specifically on the Thief Shrine route, so I'm gonna post a link to the Thief Shrine route. For any of you that wants to follow along. So I'll go probably in more detail on this, and have like some more advanced tips that I personally do on these. But yeah, I'm not gonna put a timer on here I'm gonna put like a really sample timer here, just so and get something started. I'm just gonna open this up. Yeah, there's no load remover because basically people on really potato PCs seem to have it loading at like or screens loading at a very similar speed. So if you ignore this, we're just going to do the regular timer because I don't really want to do anything fancy. So for Octopath, the time starts when you press yes, when you confirm yes to beginning your adventure as Ophilia. Am I pulling tomorrow? Yes, I am. So we're gonna start the timer at the same time we press yes. So 3, 2, 1, go. So there's gonna be a couple cutscenes that you're gonna skip here. You're gonna notice. So you're gonna want to notice like my my input screen because there is a sort of concept of like queuing movements. I can't 100% explain this, but you can kind of like queue movements, and it'll become more apparent in specific cases that you'll see. So you only get to skip a couple cutscenes before you begin to start moving. So you can press I think B or whatever. So keep in mind, since I'm running on PS4, the A and B buttons here are reversed. So just make sure that if you're running on the Switch, you mentally kind of reverse it. So just gonna run here. Just gonna hold B to skip because we're gamers. So most of the it's just like general script memorization because there's a very specific amount of items that you get. So yeah, this is pretty simple. We're just gonna guide that boy here. Hold B to skip more cutscenes, and you don't get a tutorial prompt here. But notice on my I'm queuing. I'm kind of like holding the left joystick on a certain direction so that I can immediately start moving. So a lot of Octopath quote-unquote skill is basically menuing and learning how to think on the fly. So this less applies to Ophilia Thief Shrine because there's only a couple ways to go about it, but menuing speed matters a decent bit in this run, especially at a very high level. So yeah, this is pretty boring stuff. We're just gonna get through a lot of cutscenes here. So we're gonna go through the shop menu screen, and the nice thing about the shop menu screen is we're gonna buy a quartz rod here, but I see some people like scroll down more here to buy it, but this is my personal preference, so which takes less input, so I'm gonna press A to open the armor, press A to buy. Go scroll one down to the weapon screen, and then buy the quartz rod since it's at the bottom of your at the bottom of this list here. So some people are more fine with just like scrolling here, but buying it through this way is, in my opinion, faster just because you have less inputs. And if you ever forget to equip the quartz rod, you can just optimize. Now we're gonna grab this guy here. Tavern Patron, very important to the speedrun. And so we're already gonna be off to our first area here. So there's a couple ways that people go about this, and personally, some people will either choose to walk the entire way until the first encounter, or just run. So when you walk without evasive maneuvers, you're going to get encounters a little bit slower, at a slower rate than as if you did running. But since Ophilia screen, the screen is pretty long, most of the time you'll get 2 encounters, but in the rare case you'll get 1 encounter. So personally for me, since I tend to break the first encounter, I'm just going to run. So your first encounter here is always the same. You're gonna get this little, I don't know, lizard man. Ice lizard man 1 here. And thankfully, they're weak to staff, so you can choose to break here, or which is a guaranteed flee. But if you can also choose to kind of like immediately flee without breaking them, which is about 2 seconds faster on PC, but if you run the risk of failing your escape. And when you fail escapes, you have to sit and wait till your next turn. The monster attacks you once or twice, and you're generally a very sad puppy. But generally, just like especially if you're new, just breaking them and running with a regular weapon attack and running is generally fastest. So there's other ways to break them, like with spells, but in my opinion, spells are very slow and not recommended to break. I don't know what the exact chance is. It's probably like less than 50%. So we're just gonna demonstrate here. I got caught by surprise, which means that they get an action first against me. So you can choose to break him here, but just to demonstrate, I'm just gonna YOLO flee. So if you YOLO flee, you gain 2 seconds, you're a happy camper. Now you can progress on. We're just gonna press A to go through this text. And same deal here, most of the time you can only get... The first encounter here is static, you'll always get a wolf. But and you'll generally get 1 encounter here only, but if you're unlucky, you'll get a second encounter. So like the lizard man, you can break the wolf, bop them with the staff, and just flee. So one nice thing about this place is that you'll get a cutscene break here, and this also resets your step encounter. So generally, if you didn't have that, you would get 2 encounters, but because of that, you generally only get 1. Yeah, so Shill's correct. They'll generally always be weak to at least 1 type of attack from your character. So in Ophilia's case, she only has staff and light attacks, and everything's weak to either one of those. Anyway, so after that, we're just gonna move on to the first boss here. If you want, you can heal, but you can actually choose to go into here like at not full HP. But if you're under like 180 HP, I would recommend just healing. But healing here is thankfully kind of free. So this is Guardian. So this is why we guided the Tavern Patron here. He has a summon Wind attack that deals like 3 he has 2 attacks. He can attack with just a staff attack, nothing else to say, or he can do Summon Winds, which is a wind attack that hits 3 times. So this is why I recruited, because the Guardian is weak to wind, and as you see, it has 6 shields, which means that you don't want to be bopping it with the staff for like hours on end. So one thing that's important, especially like when you want to get better at these fights, is to understand damage thresholds. So you'll want to generally like try your best to count damage based on what happens. So I'm just gonna summon Tavern Patron here. So he did a Summon Winds here, which does about 180 damage. Pretty nice damage. And this is unbroken, by the way. So the rest of this, we just want to kind of just like keep bopping him. So the Guardian's broken. So we've done about, say, I don't know, 300, 400 damage? 300, 400 damage? So a fully boosted Holy Light deals actually a pretty considerable amount of damage. So just keep in mind, Guardian has 1924 HP. So we should be roughly around the 1500 HP range right now. Or like high 1500, so we're gonna do 600 damage, which means it's under 1000 now. And now that it's broken, Summon Winds deals double damage, which is 300. So it's at around like 600 HP. So generally, for the most part, 2 fully boosted Holy Lights and some extra damage from Summon Winds guy, or like an extra Holy Light, X2 Holy Light will kill the Guardian. So it's so it's also important to know when you heal. For whatever reason, this fight went amazingly smooth, assuming this guy does his job. If you see Summon Winds, it's generally a good sign that he's done a good job, but if you only see staff or like a bop on the wrong target, like, you'll want to be scared of this Dark Wisp, because when this Dark Wisp goes kaboom after 3 turns, it'll deal like 200 damage to you. And also, notice that the text for the boss here is in red. This means that they're under 33%, which means that they're probably under like 500 HP. So we know that a fully boosted Holy Light deals 600, but if it's not broken and they're not weak to it, it'll only deal half damage. So it'll deal 300. So if we get some damage here, we can actually kill them without even needing to break. So yeah, learning how to count damage, and especially at the beginning set in the first 2 boss fights of Ophilia Single Story, is really important. And it's not a skill that you'll learn immediately. It's a skill that you'll learn over time, just as you kind of like understand damage thresholds. Just gonna bop them, and yeah, another Summon Wind, so this fight is entirely free. So one thing you'll notice about boosting is that when you boost, the item Defend and Flee kind of go away. So to have the fastest inputs, you can actually kind of like press down and L1 at the same time. So as you notice here, I press down and L1, and thankfully also these abilities are also in the same spot, and they'll be based on an order that I'll teach you all about like later on when it's relevant. So yeah, so I know that the Guardian's gonna die like at red HP from a fully boosted Holy Light. So this fight went amazingly smooth, but if the fight doesn't go as smooth as you normally see it, a good threshold to heal is around like 100 HP, because the Guardian kind of hurts. Yeah, so everything's generally pretty set order here, because you won't see it yet, but your abilities are pretty much like in the same order. So now we just had to walk here. If I get a Kate, I won't kill it, because this isn't a real run. And I don't want to encourage newbies to grind for Kates. So we're just gonna walk out here. So also, if anyone has any questions about Octopath speedrunning in general, or like anything about the specific single story, feel free to ask. there's generally just like a lot of little things. I'll try to get to it as much as possible, but it's possible I might skip over some stuff. Yeah, so if you so you can also unboost, but like for example, if you want to get to like your like if Ophelia had a secondary job, you can use it to get to your secondary place pretty fast if you want to like use an unboosted attack, for example, but I personally don't do that. It's it just feels a lot awkward to me. It's just personal preference. So you are guaranteed an encounter here, and it is a lizard, so we're just gonna flee here as an example, and yeah, I failed to escape, so now I get to pay for it with time loss. Yeah, so let's pretend like this was like warrior skills or something. So let's pretend this was warrior skills or something, and I clicked on that, so when I unboost here, so when I go down to cleric boost and unboost here, I'm at cleric skill. So it's useful primarily for like Ophilia, where you generally have to do like one more input, but I personally don't do that. And as for escape mechanics, you can fail escape up to 4 times before your 5th try is guaranteed. But of course, failing an escape 4 times in a row is really bad. And not ideal. We're just gonna make our way through here. And so yeah, these ants hurt. I'm also at not ideal HP, so I don't really have a choice but to flee. Yeah, it's a really annoying for low-level encounters, but usually for high-level encounters, you're kind of dead. And yeah, as you see, you don't have to go through the path. You can just cut through the bushes. Like whenever you're doing exploration, just like in the overworld, you kind of want to be as efficient with your movements as possible because this game is based on a step encounter. Like any extra step that you can take means that you're that much closer to possibly getting an encounter that you don't want. Now we're here in Atlas Dam. So this only applies to the first character. So when you recruit your first character ever, you're gonna get a little tutorial prompt here that you'll have to press an extra B action on. So this only applies to your very first character. So you want to press yes and then press no. So if you press yes, you're going to be a very unhappy camper. So the encounter rate is based on steps. It's generally the same by area, though. Based on the different areas, the distance is slightly different. It's hard to explain, but it's generally easier to explain in context of a place like Victor's Hollow area, where you can run a much shorter distance and still get an encounter, but most of the areas are generally like the same. So now we've recruited Cyrus. You're going to want to scrutinize this person here. So also a fun fact about your path actions, they're based on your party order. So you can change your party order by pressing Y, or in my case square. So for example here, I have Cyrus as my first character now, and scrutinize is now my first path action. This is only relevant in some of the half game and full game categories because party swapping will be part of it for general efficiency of menuing. But for single stories, you don't have to care about that. So, I don't want to grab this light soulstone here. So because we had to beat up Russell without any fancy soulstones, we kind of had to grab some extra very useful items. We're gonna get some gear for Cyrus here, so unlike the other menu that I told about, we not only have to buy a quartz rod, we also have to buy armor, so generally you want to do everything through the alt menu. We're gonna give this quartz rod to Cyrus, and so the money here can depend, but sometimes you won't have enough for 2 pointed hats. In the case where you only have enough for 1 pointed hat, you want to give it to Cyrus. But in this case, I have enough for 2 pointed hats, so I can give it to Ophilia. It's more important for Cyrus to have it because he's gonna want it for the Russell fight. And for Ophilia, it's just nice to have the extra damage for comfort, and it'll grant you some ranges while you're grinding for evasive maneuvers outside after Russell. So this is Subterranean Study. We're gonna get a guaranteed two encounters here, generally, unless you get a Shadow Soulstone. Yeah, so if the ad doesn't spawn, you can be short money, because that ad, technically, when it spawns, it gives you extra money. So you're gonna get your guaranteed encounter here. You generally want Cyrus first, but if Cyrus isn't first, it's not a big deal. Having Cyrus first just means that you can get the first turn kill, and when you get a first turn kill, you get 10% more JP, which in this case, you get 1 extra JP, and it's actually gonna come in useful. It actually can come in useful, because you want all the JP that you can get. Efficiently, of course. So, since we didn't have Cyrus first, it's gonna break with Ophi and defend with Cyrus, and just boost Fireball. And so yeah, as you see here, we didn't get the first turn kill, so we only got 5 JP, which is a base 5 JP. Generally, for the most part, you want to kill 2 encounters here, especially as a beginner. Which, generally, if you go for this Light Soulstone here, you'll usually get it. And yeah, this is also an unfortunate encounter, but it's perfectly fine, especially if Cyrus is first, but not first, so... So Mr. Bones only gives you 4 JP instead of 5. Which is kind of unfortunate, but you just have to live with it. So because we only got 4 JP, after the Russell fight, we're not going to have enough JP for Lightning Blast. I'm gonna grab this Light Soulstone here. So if you got a Shadow Soulstone drop from Guardian, you can skip the Soulstone. Which means that you can generally get only 1 encounter. So sometimes you only get 1 encounter on the way to there. So there's a couple things that you do different. Well, it's not much different, but it just means that the fights will be slower if you don't have Lightning Blast after Russell. So let's go into the Russell fight. You'll notice we still have Mr. Summon Windsdew, which is still going to be very useful here. One important thing to note about Russell is that the first 3 turns, you always want Cyrus to do the same thing, pretty much. So, you also want Cyrus first here on turn 2, but unfortunately, you know, it didn't happen, so it's going to be slightly slower. We're going to take extra hits, and we may have to heal. We're just going to Fireball here, because we want to kill these ads on turn 3. So that we can get them out of the way. Oh, they're being really rude. So, this is actually really unfortunate. I can risk something really bad. So I'm actually going to choose to heal Cyrus here. So generally you want to summon on turn 1, but because I don't want to risk Cyrus dying, since everyone gets their actions before Cyrus, so you can opt to do this instead. So I just decided to heal first, and then just summon on turn 2. Not ideal, but it's okay. So one specific thing to know about Russell is that your Soulstones will be doing a minimum of either 600 or 800 damage, depending on when you use those Soulstones. So in this case, we're going to be doing 600 damage, because we're going to be using the Soulstones on an Unbroken Russell here. And by the way, Russell has 3k HP, so like with Guardian, learning how to count damage is really important. So we want to use Icewind here when Russell's not broken, because if Russell's not broken, because we'll do some extra damage and we'll be able to kill the Wisp here after we throw a Light Soulstone at it. So now with them out of the way, we have a much easier time dealing with Russell here. And basically, from here on, it's just a matter of breaking Russell and being efficient with your damage, so. So in this case, I have an opportunity, since I don't have any BP on Cyrus, and he's not going to do that much damage, I'm just going to throw a Soulstone here. So, Russell has a general pattern here. Tome Tempest does like 50 damage to each of your people, and Fireball deals like I think 80 damage. So just keep that in mind, because if you let Russell get a lot of turns, you might need to heal. And Ophelia's heal wounds is actually pretty good in this fight. So we're just gonna keep bopping Russell here. So hopefully we get a summon wins here, which is actually really nice. So for general reference, a fully boosted Holy Light also does around 600 damage to Russell, and a fully boosted Fireball or Ice Wind Broken will deal around 400 damage to Russell. So you'll want to keep those damage thresholds in mind, and if the lower boosted attacks you have, you'll want to divide it by, I think, 1.33%. So, for example, if you did a times 3 Holy Light, it'll do like 400 damage instead of 600. Or just DM me about it. I don't want to answer questions about that here, because I'm doing a tutorial run. So, I don't really want to use any JSP on Cyrus, because it takes extra time, so... They're just gonna fully boost our attacks here. So that's around 1,000 damage a pop. So yeah, you'll also want to pay attention here, because I got an Ice Soulstone here. So you'll want to pay attention to whether or not you get the Soulstone, because if you get the Soulstone, Ice Soulstone as a drop here, it's pretty useful for fights. I'll explain it later, because this tutorial assumes that you have some experience, or like this tutorial doesn't assume that you're this tutorial will assume that you've kind of like read through the document. This isn't really like a marathon style tutorial. This is kind of more like you're speedrunning this. You want to kind of like understand like all the little things, and not really like what Cyrus does. So you'll notice that like when I went through the cutscene, I kind of shot out of here. So that's because like after I went through like the kind of like the reward screen, I hold B, and when you hold B and you kind of like turn your left joystick at a certain time at a certain timing, your character will shoot out. So this cutscene will play in mind for Tressa's ending sequence, as well as one of Ophelia's cutscenes coming up here. So I didn't get into that because I kind of pressed B too fast, but I'll get into it here in a second. So we're just gonna finish Cyrus's story, or chapter 1 here. So you don't have to. One thing is that you don't have to be here to end the story. You can actually just like, if you want to take less steps, you can finish Cyrus' chapter 1 just by going in that corner. So after this, it's a good time to learn skills. So you're definitely gonna want to learn Luminescence on Ophilia to help you grind JP, because you're gonna want to grind in Whistlewood to get Cyrus 130 JP in total to learn evasive maneuvers. And yeah, because we got Mr. Bones and we didn't get ideal encounters, we don't have enough JP, but that's perfectly fine. You can also technically delay learning Luminescence if you want, so that you can learn both Luminescence and Lightning Blast together, but for the purposes, I'll be learning Luminescence, and then after this first battle, we'll be learning Lightning Blast here, so we're just gonna make our way to Whistlewood here. So thankfully, we got our Froggle friends here, which we don't need Lightning Blast for. And thankfully, the regular Froggle fights are completely free, because We can just use a fully boosted Ice Wind or Luminescence, and this fight is completely free. And yeah, once you get like... And yeah, one thing to... I'll make a note of this later, but you'll notice that when we learn Luminescence, it's automatically our last slot, and as mentioned earlier, the slots, the order that these abilities are in are kind of based on the orders like that you see in the skill menu here. So you can basically kind of like learning how the fast menu is kind of important, as I said. So as I said, we're gonna be quickly boosting and hitting Luminescence because we only need a boosted Luminescence here to kill. So now we have enough JP to learn Lightning Blast here, and yeah, as I mentioned before, these skills are going to be the same skill order that you see in game, or in a battle, when you go to the Cleric skills that you're going to be using in battle. So yeah, as you saw in that last battle, we have the exact same order. We had Heal Wounds, Holy Light, and Luminescence. Knowing this order is just going to be important, because these orders are just generally going to be the same. And when you learn new abilities, these orders can slightly change. So we're going to learn Lightning Blast on Cyrus. So Lightning Blast will be our very bottom skill here. And yeah, menus are just generally like really fluid. Like you can do like really fast menus in. Even in Switch, you can do like really fast menus, but yeah, this is me doing this on a keyboard. So yeah, I'm running on wired, so I don't have any drop inputs really. But I have had problems with wireless dropping inputs. Yeah, so I'll explain the cursor. Nice. I'll kill this because I think the gamers want this. So we got a Kate here before Whistlewood, which means that we can skip the entire Whistlewood grind. So if you have a Light Soulstone M here, it's basically free. So any damage that you deal to Kates is divided by, I forget how much, like it's 1% of the usual damage. So for example, Light Soulstones deal a base 1100, but to Kate's it'll deal 11 damage, which the Kate only has 4 HP, so it's a goner. So this means that you're gonna have a good RNG, quote unquote. So yeah, we basically skipped the Whistlewood encounter. No longer do you have to deal with the pain. So this is actually more useful in the Warrior Wort route because it allows you to skip a certain Scrutinize, but since we're doing the Thief Shrine route, it doesn't matter. So now we've gotten a lot of XP and JP, and then we don't even have to go to Whistlewood. You can just learn Reflective Veil here. Because it's useful for the last boss, and we're going to learn Blizzard here, which is going to be useful here for the entire boss, and yeah. The menus are very fluid. Like, when you actually want to play at top level in the run, you generally want to practice the menus as much as you can. Like, just basically kind of like rapid fire those menus. Since for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going really slow. I can show you all without like you all being like, what the heck is happening around here? So yeah, we basically got a free ride, but don't expect that to happen every day. So now comes like the really boring part of exploration. So like I said, movement, how you handle movement is pretty important here. It's generally easier to have more precise movement with the joystick, with the controller stick here. But you can basically do the same thing. So I'll be doing some of this actually with keyboard, just to demonstrate. But now, basically, you just run around and grab a whole bunch of stuff here. So you want that light M here. And generally, like in these routes, generally like in a lot of Octopath routes, it's generally just like geared towards most efficient item pickup as possible. So if you have any other Octopath speedrunning questions, it's a good time to ask because we're just gonna be running around here for a good while. And yeah, so you generally don't get encounters here except when you get that purple chest, but that purple chest is not relevant in this speedrun. So one really nice thing is you can press your minus button on a Switch or your select button on whatever else to open the menu straight up, so you don't have to press this. Go to world map, and also, this is the Thief Shrine route. Also, you'll notice that I immediately exit the menu here when I press X. So this lets, so I see a lot of people here just like spam this to exit the menu. But you can just basically like from a lot of menu stuff, exit the menu just like that. Also, there's one thing that Octopath doesn't really tell you, is you can press, so you kind of see how I'm going at like a medium speed here, and Switch it's ridiculously slow. But if you press R1 here, your speed actually, the speed of which this cursor moves actually increases. And you can actually also, when you zoom out as well, your cursor speed increases a little bit more, and when you press R1, it increases even more. So now we're zooming. So generally, like when you kind of traveling like fast or slow distance areas, you don't want to like really expand the map, because unless you're going to a very far place, because it's like seeing it zoom out is can be slow. So yeah. So press R. So R1's a very good button, especially for the Switch. It's doubly important for the Switch because on the Switch it's ridiculously slow. PC is fine. And I want to reiterate, you can use any of these tips and apply them to the Switch. That's why I'm primarily running on a controller here, just to demonstrate. So yeah, you can see here that there's like these little corners that you can cut. Pretty useful. You just want to basically reduce the amount of steps as much as you can, because any chance that you can get of reducing encounters is a potential chance that your run could have been saved. Now we're gonna get... So yeah, but even then, sometimes you're just gonna get encounters here. So with 2 characters, it's actually a little bit riskier to run from encounters, because you have to go through more actions of people not being able to flee if you fail. So one option that you can do, like, for example, you can just choose to break these birds here. I think Cyrus is gonna kill them. Yeah, because he's level 14. And so now we're just gonna recruit Tressa here. There's not really much to say until the second encounter. But I'll give you a PC only tip, assuming you're running on controller. So you can use actually both your controller and keyboard to mash through text here, and they'll mash like slightly faster. So and see how fast this goes with both keyboard and controller. So this is a PC only thing. I'm sorry, Switch gamers. You can kind of be fast with pressing the keyboard too, but yeah. I'm not sure, because I think they would register as the same input. You'll have to test it. That's a good point, though. But you use pretty much a majority of your buttons in Octopath, so like, kind of rebinding buttons might have like a bad effect. Like use a lot of buttons for like boosting, etc. So not much to say about Tressa here, except for this first encounter. Like I said, you can choose to break or run from them. Breaking's riskier, but faster. Generally, especially with 3 people, it's recommended you kind of break them, because especially if you're new, because you can lose a lot of time to failing escapes here. And it can be risky because Tressa can take damage and can die. Someone can die to Mick and Mac. So just press B here for these first two cutscenes. Press A here to go through this cutscene. Yeah, so you'll notice here I'm also just queuing up movement here, so I'm gonna be putting my joystick down, and yeah, I'm just gonna be running down. So you just generally, a lot of times, just don't want to let go of B. Because when you let go of B, you stop running, and you'll need to start running again. But this isn't the case like for when you go into battles. So we're going to be introduced... So I do want to introduce the concept of like your item menuing. Knowing this is going to be really important because there's a very specific position that your items will be in. And I have this dandy handy image here that tells you how things are kind of settled here. And let's expand this real quick. So yes, this item order is actually important because it's pretty much exactly the same here. General order, so healing grapes first, plums second, any pomegranates you have, which doesn't apply in this case because I'm broken, don't have any, jams, olives, any herbs that you have, and then soulstones. So you'll notice that these soulstones here that we just got, purely for the fight, are at the bottom here. So if you still had the shadow soulstone for whatever reason, it's going to be at the bottom here, and you'll need to put into consideration. But if you have these soulstones here at the bottom, you can just pretty much just like what I call rapid menu soulstone. So you only have to throw the bottom two soulstones here, which is the light M and light L. So we're just gonna do that here. So you just rapid fire this, and it's really nice with Cyrus and Tress because they don't need much. Oh shit. Well, it doesn't matter anyways. You'll be fine. Rip. Okay, let me play through that battle again, just to demonstrate. Here, I'll just reload to the title, pretend that didn't happen. So this rapid menu is going to be pretty important to know. And yes, soulstone tracking is a big thing. Especially in longer categories, or like any categories where knowing your soulstones is really important. So just gonna go through the fight again, and you'll miss it if you blink, pretty much. So that's one. Not in Ophi. In the other categories, it will matter. Especially later on, because soulstones are just soulstones. And yeah. When you have an idea where your soulstones are, your menu will be like really rapid. Because I knew my light M and light L were at the bottom, like, and the order in which I used them didn't matter. I just pretty much just like rapid menu back to the bottom here. So I do want to mention here before I end this, there are cutscenes where you kind of like shoot yourself out of. Cyrus being one of them that I forgot to show you, because it's gonna be really nice to kind of like gain yourself that extra boost. So basically, you're gonna want to like hold B when we enter the cutscene, and then, as you see here with my controller stick, you're gonna want to hold it in kind of like the south-east direction, and that will kind of like launch you like straight down. Because Tress's cutscene is one of those cutscenes. Tress's ending chapter 1 cutscene is one of the cutscenes where you can immediately gain control of your character right after the fight, or right after, so I'll demonstrate it to you just now. And just as you see like that, I've kind of launched myself out. And so, yeah, after this, we had to do a lot more exploration. Most of this probably isn't relevant till later, but yeah, as you see, I forgot to mention there, if you didn't get an ice soulstone from Russell, you'll want to get that light soulstone to my right, the chest that I just passed. Because it's going to be useful for any optional encounters that you'll get. Because some of the monsters there, you can kill with an Ice M and a Light S, so useful item to get. If you're experienced and you just don't want to deal with those encounters, it's generally not necessary, but for a beginner, having that will be a nice peace of mind. Everything's pretty much straightforward here, so we're going to be getting our first shrine here, and you're going to be getting a prompt here. I do want to note, there is a low possibility if you press inputs at the exact same time, you can soft lock. This is more apparent on Switch than on PC. So when this tutorial screen comes up, like if you press mash B at like the exact same frame, you can actually soft lock out of this soft lock on this screen. So if you're on Switch, just be careful. And yeah, a lot of single stories basically, you have like a good file, like a good like 30-40% exploration, 30 to 50% exploration, and the rest of it is actual content. We're just gonna save here. Oh, I needed that save. I shouldn't have, but whatever. So one thing to note also, under miscellaneous, if you're running on PC, you'll get to quit the game. But on Switch, you only have these 3 options. So if you're playing on PC, you'll need to kind of scroll one more to get to return to title. But on Switch, it's pretty free. So just gonna return to title here so that we can reset our step counter. We're gonna be getting more boring shrines here. And yeah, if I have time here, I'll actually demonstrate a full Thief Shrine run after this. But yeah, feel free to shoot out any more questions, because there's going to be at least 7 minutes of just Resident Sleeper exploration, which is mostly self-explanatory. How long have I been running Octopath? Since I think September 2019. So you're gonna scrutinize this guy. You don't need to grab the item now, but it's gonna be useful later. And then you're gonna be treated to your first Octopath gacha here, so we kind of want to scrutinize this guy for 6. Well, it's usually 60%, but since I advocate it's 72%. But we kind of want to get this a safe route information so that we can complete a quest for money. It's gonna be pretty useful here. So yeah, These screens coming up are pretty infamous for giving you lots of encounters here. So you kind of want to be like as tight with your movement as possible. I recommend it. Everyone's very helpful. And they can pretty much answer any questions that you probably couldn't think of, like during the stream. So you'll notice here I'm kind of like trying to loot chest as late as I can, or as far as I can. This is also just to save movement, and also the same thing with the save point here. I'm trying to click on it as far away as I can. And yeah, this screen just has a ton of places where you can get encounters, so now, the Octopath community is nowhere near the Pokemon community, and if there's any idiots like that, then they get stomped down pretty quick. So if you notice the bush kind of like just to the south of that save point, you can actually run over it. It's a lot easier on Switch than on PC. On PC, you have to be a little bit more precise. What did you miss? So if you can run on this, it's not necessarily like the greatest thing, but yeah. No, I meant that if there's any people in the Octopath community being assholes, they get basically stomped on. Or they basically get put in their place. But anyhow, yeah, this bush you can actually run over. If you run precisely, but I didn't get it this time. But on Switch, it's completely free, but you just have to take extra movement. It's unfortunate, but, you know, you can't have nice things. So yeah, I got no encounters there, but I'm very used to the movement. And you'll learn how to kind of like try to optimize your movement as much as you can, but sometimes you just don't get lucky. So we're going to buy the unerring bracelet here, so one thing to note is that when you start buying something, your quantity always starts at 1, so I've seen some people accidentally buy 2, but you don't want to like press up. You just want to press double A input, and then just buy that. We're going to be looting the usual items here. Yeah, the step counter is pretty much random, so, you know, sometimes it just do be that way. There's nothing you can do. Also, fun fact, you can get to the top of your screen here, or path actions here. You don't have to do a lot of inputs for that. We're gonna loot these two, and like I said, we're gonna make use of our dandy handy R1 button to zoom very fast. And so in this screen, so you'll notice like at the end of Ophilia, we kind of started like at the end of the bridge, but once we exited out like the regular way, we're kind of at the beginning. So it's pretty often you get an encounter here. It kind of sucks because you don't really have a nice way to break some of them, especially the beige bird, as I call them. But just be a god gamer and you don't get encounters. Just that easy. Yeah, so now instead of going west here, we're just gonna go through the north path here, because now we actually want to head to the Thief Shrine, so... Yeah, so for those of you wondering about the difference between Thief Shrine and the Warrior Wort Shrine, or the Warrior Wort route, the Thief Shrine is 2 minutes slower because you have a 2-minute detour to get to the Thief Shrine. But it's a lot safer than the Warrior Wort route, because the Warrior Wort route requires you to kind of basically think on your feet, because you have to keep in mind your soulstone route. Yeah, because the Warrior Wort might not always do what you want. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, so good thing another good thing that our nod noted is if you have a Kate, since you're higher level, your chances of fleeing these encounters are generally higher. It's not 100%, but it's still pretty good chances. So Warrior is an NPC that you can guide. You need level 14 to guide it, or you can get at level 7 if you scrutinize someone in a certain place. But Warrior has an ability called Inhibit Defenses, which means it applies basically armor corrosive to all the enemies. But it has a 33% chance of doing that, which basically means that. So having a warrior means that you can skip the thief shrine, which is pretty far, which is a far detour to get, especially in Ophilia, because we don't go around that area, but you have that risk of warrior not doing what you want. So generally, you can get through the first 2 bosses without it. Actually, the first boss, you don't have warrior by default. You can get through the second boss without it, but for the third boss, it's basically necessary unless you have a lot of soulstones. But basically, just the warrior is kind of a slightly more intermediate route for people who are looking for like more challenge and think that the Thief Shrine is kind of like too one-sided for them. So yeah, we tag Sunshade there, just following the route. So for your first pass here, since you're doing the Thief Shrine route, you're gonna want to go north from here. If you're going the Warrior route, you don't even have to tag Sunshade, you just go straight west to Saints Bridge. But since we're gonna be doing the Thief Shrine route here, we tag Sunshade because Sunshade is a quick way to get past, because we're gonna have to kind of like pass by that area again when we go to Saints Bridge, and Sunshade is a very quick way to teleport to somewhere that's close to it. So this is a common place to get encounters here, because this is kind of a long walk. But I didn't get an encounter here, so you can use to choose. So in this Thief Shrine route, you actually kind of want to keep track of your soulstones here. So you have this Thunder L and this Ice M here. You can choose to use both of these against the encounters you find here. Well, you shouldn't be getting... You can use this against like a couple encounters that I'll be pointing out, but you can't. And for the lower level encounters, you can use this Ice M here if you want. But you'll need to keep in mind that if you use any of those stones, you're going to need some backups. And I'll outline them later. So we're just going to make our way through this area here. So I see a lot of new people also getting tripped by like the way they run here. So I see a lot of people kind of just like go zigzag. Don't go zigzag like when you run through areas, because that just increases the amount of steps you do and increases the chance that you can get an encounter in. So we take this because it's just generally safer. It's technically not necessary, but it just makes this run a lot safer. So just try to pay attention to how I do the movement here, because if you kind of like just like zigzag your way, it's pretty likely you'll get an encounter here. But if you do it correctly, the chances of you getting an encounter is pretty uncommon. So we're gonna want to kind of like stay close to there. We kind of want to do like diagonal movement across there, and then just kind of like staying near the edges. And that's it. So if you got an encounter there, you can choose to use a Thunder L on it, but that just means you won't have the Soulstone for the potential Saints Bridge encounter, which is more common and whatnot. You can't do diagonal. You kind of can. So it's not as precise though. So if you press down or up and then one of the left or right directional keys is diagonal. So for demonstrating purposes, since we do have potential PC gamers, I will do this on keyboard. But I am a little scuffed because I don't use keyboard as much. So after we get the shrine, we're just going to teleport to Sunshade. Like, you're perfectly fine, like, playing with keyboard, but it's just, like, a slight inconvenience, but you can still, like, do really well with the keyboard. Like, keyboard inputs are just generally a lot more smoother, and it can feel a lot faster than playing on a controller. Yeah, thankfully, this is you shouldn't get an encounter here. If it is, it's pretty rare. So, but this next screen, he plays on keyboard, yes. I'm just gonna say this, you don't need a keyboard to have quadra level speed when it comes to menuing. Because there are, some of the top runners also use a controller, like, generally not as fast, but it generally is not as fast in the best of scenario cases, but when you're playing the top level, it's not only your inputs that you want to consider, it's also, like, your decision making that affects things a lot. So yeah, I'm just gonna run through this with keyboard here. Yeah, keyboard's 100% viable. So you can pretty much, so you can't, so it's generally common you get an encounter here, especially if you're new. No problem, good night. I'm not gonna be really replying to, like, non-Octopath stuff, because I want to be focused on the Octopath tutorial stuff, so if I don't reply to you, don't be offended. So, generally, so you technically do not have to buy this, but if you didn't get any encounters on the way, but if you did get an encounter, you'll definitely want to buy this Shadow L. But for purposes of, because if you, so, but the cost is generally, like, when you get this Shadow L, you'll generally want to grab some extra money, because it does cost a lot. So, it's 6k gold, but you can easily make it up. There's a lot of places in Ophilia Single Story where you can easily make the money up. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just gonna buy it. Hey, nice discount. And if you use an M stone as well, you're gonna want to buy a Shadow M here too. But if you didn't use your M stone on the way, you don't need to buy it. Yeah, there's ways around it, but you just don't want to waste time having to get extra money when you don't need to. So, same thing. You want to buy the L stone here. And then you're going to want to do the scrutinize here. So, if you fail all 5 here, it's not the end of the world. You can also proceed and finish up chapter 2. But, hey, I got a second try, so we're gaming. But, in case you failed it, you can just go back to the tavern here. Just restore your reputation, and then just head and just, like, proceed. But you will have to do it after you kill Rotbitnir. But thankfully, if you choose to do it later, it's actually a 36% chance instead of a 30%. Assuming you didn't get a Kate earlier, like I did. Yeah, you can't... Yeah. But even with selling that, you can be short money, because the money route is a little bit tight for this category. Like, if you don't get any extras. Or if you decide to buy extras without grabbing extra money items. So now, we're gonna go to the infamous part, because everybody hates this part, but you commonly get encounters before hitting the save point here, and when you get them, it hurts. If you didn't use any soulstones, like, on your way here, so we'll do a soulstone check here, but you're gonna want a minimum of 3 L stones, because, or you're gonna want a minimum of 3 L stones, because you use 1 L stone. Actually, no, 2 L stones and 1 M. So you're gonna use 1 L stone for the encounter inside Mirkwood. You're gonna use 1 L stone for Hrotvitnir, and you're gonna be using 1 M. So that's why I mentioned if you use an M earlier, you definitely want to buy another M stone. But we have 4 soul stones here, so we can afford to chuck some extra. So if we don't get through here without an encounter, which is what happened here, you can just save and quit here. Getting an encounter here can be kind of bad because if you get ambush, it hurts. I'm gonna grab this money chest here. But if you didn't get the encounter here, if you got the encounter here and you killed it, you don't have to save and quit here. You can just proceed on. So it technically saves you like a little bit of time because if you didn't get ambushed, but there's a risk-reward factor in it. So yeah. If you killed the encounter here but found out you only had one L stone and one M stone left, you can choose to save here. Like, save here, but the thing is, you're kind of likely to get an encounter here because the walk to the boss place is pretty long. But we're just gonna run through here because we still want to take encounters here because we're gonna want levels. Because we're gonna be tanking we're gonna be tanking various things. And yes, you can often get ambushed, and yes, you will lose time. But since I'm higher level, I have a lesser chance of getting ambushed. And yeah, like I said, unless you kept your light S stone and didn't buy the Shadow L, you can pretty much also like rapid fire your menu here. You just throw whatever L stone you have at this encounter. So we're gonna go to the equipment menu here first. So you can press L1 and L2 to switch between characters. Or like up and down. Whatever you like. So we're gonna equip the unerring bracelet. So one thing to note about optimize is that it doesn't optimize any accessories. So you need to manually equip unerring on Tressa. So when you do this menu here, you're gonna want to go one down here. Teach armor corrosive. Go one up. Teach hired help. Go directly down. Teach hired help, and then press spearhead. So that's all you need to learn for the purposes of this category. And just to keep in mind, if you're at a regular level, like level 6 for Ophilia and Tressa, they're not 100% accurate against this boss. So there's not much to say because this fight is entirely scripted, but I will be going through this normally. The only thing you need to note is that never ever break on turn 1. Because if you break on turn 1, you'll be very unhappy. So just keep in mind because the script deals more shield, can deal more shield damage than what you need. So just keep that in mind. If you see that you're about to break them, you can just do nothing, or just like defend instead. So, but other than that, nothing else much to say about Rotvidnir aside from like totally learning better menus. So I'll just proceed with this as if I were doing a regular run. The one thing to note is that each character, also for one thing I forgot, each character's like weapons are kind of like in a certain direction. So for Ophilia, your sword is always one to the right. So you can also like queue up multiple actions too. So you'll see there I boosted and went to swap the sword, but since I don't want to break him on this turn, all I need to do. And also, you can boost armor corrosive here, even though it says not to, but boosting armor corrosive just makes it a faster menu. Like that. So yeah, nothing. This fight's generally just like self-explanatory aside from the first turns. And yes, for those of you Switch people answering, you can do this on... You can have fast menus like that on the Switch as well. I mean, in 30 FPS, of course, but it still feels really nice on the Switch. So yeah, if you failed your 36% scrutinize or 30% scrutinize, you can just run back here, assuming you already reset the tavern. But you can't, you don't want to complete this. You don't want to go here until you've gotten your scrutinize finished. Now we're just gonna go here and buy iron bracelets. So you can press left and right here to kind of like go to the ends of the menu here. So as you see here, one button to the right, and I'm already at the empowering bracelet. So you can also press down to buy the maximum amount that you can afford here. So, which is nice here because we need exactly 6. And then we just need to buy the charm roll for Sire. So one thing to note is that if you had to like restore reputation, or if you didn't have enough money for a charm roll or whatever, you can just sell your money items here and you're guaranteed enough. So yeah, you have to manually equip all of your bracelet items here. So I personally just like to R1, like to swap through characters, because I can rapidly use up and down to transition. Like when I press A to like go through someone's actual equipment menu, I can rapidly equip empowering bracelets here. And you're gonna want to heal everyone to Ophi, so you can't. So some people might say, why don't you use healing grapes? You're kind of low on healing grapes, and you do tend to get encounters. But once you're more advanced and you understand the route a lot better, and you're more strict with things, you can use healing grapes. But for new people, just use Ophilia's healing skill, because it's fast enough to mash anyways. So since this is a far menu scroll to Goldshore, you'll want to kind of scroll out, zoom out, and press R1. Then you're gonna want to scrutinize this old lady right here for another money item. No worries. And then we're gonna turn in the safe route here for more money. Grab more money here. I'm gonna grab this, scrutinize this lady for a soulstone. And we're gonna grab that M. It's okay. That's a pretty common mistake a lot of people make, even in the warrior work category, because you do have to do a very similar thing. And it's very easy to forget. So we're just gonna go through more plot line here, guide more people. So the reason why we don't just like walk over here is because, and generally in routing, when you have places that you walk very far, you kind of want to like take that time to transition to another place and do something else. So that's why, even though that's why we delayed lock to later, even though we looted, because we want to make use of our time in Grandport to loot lock. So lock is pretty self-explanatory. It's very rare to get an encounter there. In all my time I've had spent speedrunning it, I've only gotten an encounter in there once. But it's extremely rare, assuming you have decent movement, of course. Yeah, it's... Yeah, exactly what Ink said. Yeah, so not equipping the unerring bracelet can give you really bad results for Mystery Man and Shady Figure, because that's mainly what you have it for. It's not as big of a problem for Rodventnir, but it can be a huge issue for it can be a huge issue for Mystery Man and Shady Figure. So we're just gonna pick up the items that we had here, and then we're also going to do yet another soulstone check here, which you won't do in a real run. You shouldn't do in a real run, but just for the purpose of this, you want 2 soulstones, 2 L stones for Mystery Man and Shady Figure. So you get 3 by default, but just putting it out there. If you're an advanced runner, you can choose to skip getting some of these, but since we're in the context of a beginner, we want to we're just gonna pick them up for safety. So, and yes, you don't have to talk to Matthias. It's not required. So this is where your movement also matters, because this is a pretty common place to also get encounters. As you notice, this is also a thing with Ophilia Single Story. So if you remember what I mentioned during Tressa at the end of Tressa 1, when we get to this cutscene, if there's only 2 buttons or 2 inputs that we had to press X on, so which is pretty fast, but you're gonna notice that we're also gonna get momentum here. So we're gonna make it through here without getting an encounter. So yeah, you'll notice we were immediately able to move here. So since this is another extremely long screen, we're gonna want to save and quit here too, in the context of a single story. So I notice a lot of people saving right here, but people should be saving like right here, because wherever you save at, like the position that you save at, you're gonna load in that exact same spot. So you're gonna notice here when I save and quit here. And this also means that it just takes less steps for you. So as you see, we spawn in the exact same spot. And yes, do not cross that bridge to the right here. That bridge is a trap. You want to follow the torches. So one thing to note here that I don't include in my guide, there's also a silver-filled pouch here to the south, down those stairs, that you can get for an extra 8,000 gold. But generally we don't get it just because it's a long distance, and it's gonna usually involve a save and quit at that save point right there. But generally, MMSF is also pretty self-explanatory. You're gonna want the unerring bracelet, or else your spearhead will be quite inaccurate. If this were the warrior route, this route would have a lot more variance, but since this is I will explain one thing when we get into the fight though, and that is cursors. So this fight is entirely scripted as well, assuming you don't miss spearhead, which is extremely rare. So, assuming doing this is normal. So you notice the default cursor is generally going to be your enemy to, I think, your rightmost, and your default person is going to be like your first person. So just keep that in mind when I started explaining this. So, and so now you're going to see an instance of this cursor changing here. So we're going to use Tressa here, and the Palm L Tressa. And you're gonna see why I mention the cursor here later, here in a second here. So the cursor kind of acts pretty weirdly. So when we use another Palm L again, like if you see how I hovered over the Palm L, it still targets Tressa, because Tressa was the last person who got a VP boosting item. So, however, this resets sometimes when you defend. So I don't know exactly 100% how these mechanics work, but there's like a generalized targeting system. So, and this also kind of applies to enemies as well, because I needed to move my cursor here to target Shady Figure here. And then you're going to see that my initial target when I try to attack will be Shady Figure. And the unique thing about this is that this also extends to pretty much any enemy that you'll be facing. So if I were to face like some random encounter, it's going to default to whatever's on the left instead of whatever default was on the right. So especially this is apparent especially in longer categories because your cursor placement matters, and learning how the cursor mechanics work is another major big deal. And also, when you the only place where these cursors entirely reset, I believe, is when you quit the game and reload the game. So if you like kind of return to title screen, or like if you continue your save after you died, your cursor will be in the same spot. So that's a general explanation of cursors. But basically, they'll generally remain pretty static as long as you don't defend. So you're going to see here in a second once we defend. So which is part of Cyrus's job. So sometimes it's not 100% that it targets the same person. So as you see here, now my cursor, which used to be on Shady Figure, has reset back to Mystery Man. And my item target can still be Tressa. So I don't know exactly what makes it sometimes target Ophilia instead, but that's something to very much keep in mind, that your cursor for whoever you target and as an ally and your enemies, it'll kind of like, what's that word? It'll kind of go past. It'll kind of be remembered in your next battles. Anyways, but that's a long-winded explanation of cursors. It's pretty complicated. I understand if it's a lot to take in. I hope I explained that relatively well, but in longer categories, it is extremely important that you know the basic concepts of cursor mechanics. And it's okay if you mess up the cursor mechanics, because every single runner has been there. Pretty much almost all the experienced runners have screwed up because cursor mechanics are great. And also, the nice thing about this route is that you have a free collect on Shady Figure, because the soulstone won't kill him. So if you had to buy like the Shadow L for whatever reason, you can collect your extra 5k from Shady Figure, and that will make up the money that you used. Okay, persist. Persist was the word I was looking for. And yes, that's correct. It persists when you start a new game. It'll stop persisting when you entirely close the game. So now we're just gonna teleport to Noble Court here, and so for this menu here where we give Ophilia Warrior here, I do this a certain way. So I don't start with Ophilia, I actually start with Tressa, because it makes the menus a lot more smoother, because I want her to become the thief, so, and I want her to also learn another warrior skill so she gets cover. So I'm gonna teach cover here. And it's also nice to know that these skills will always be in a static place, so like I said, when you're trying to get good at a category, you want to practice the menus as much as you can. Because a lot of these menus are pretty static. And there's not as much variance, so we start with Tressa first, we learn Thief. If you didn't learn Reflective Veil here, you would learn Reflective Veil here. And then So for Ophilia, you want 1,000 Spears, because 1,000 Spears is going to be really useful for the next mandatory fight coming up here. And then the other important thing is that you want to give Tressa and Ophilia cover, so this is what makes Matthias a relatively decent fight, because if he cast Consuming Darkness first, aside from any menuing or like equipment mistakes you do, it's completely free. And you'll also notice I still keep the Unerring Bracelet on Tressa because it's going to be useful also for this next mandatory fight. Because we're not going to be very accurate. So one thing to note also too, when you battle encounters that are much higher level than you, your accuracy isn't very good. Which is why, as you see in like my break scripts, I'll generally try to encourage you to use like some form of hired help. Because hired help has near 100% accuracy on these monsters, even though they're like a whole bunch of levels higher than you. This only doesn't apply to Kates, but so I'm talking about accuracy in high level areas. Because you're like pretty low level, you're gonna be missing high level mobs most of the time. So let's see if I can demonstrate this, show this off like during this fight. Hired help only misses on Kates. It pretty much does not miss on anything else. We're gonna grab this. So it's common to be surprised here, but these drakes don't really do anything. So this is why we kind of want Unerring Bracelet on Tressa, because it's gonna help. It's not 100% help, but it makes us more accurate towards these. And so we learned 1,000 Spears specifically here because 1,000 Spears is guaranteed to hit 3 times. And both of these plains drakes have 2 shields. So one of them is guaranteed to be broken. So same thing with Rain of Arrows in the case of Hunter. It hits 3 times guaranteed. As well as Guardian Lion Dog, which is a War Master skill. So you can actually do this later, but if you're new, you're gonna want to do this now, because if you forget it, you're gonna regret it. So you want to replace the Unerring Bracelet with the Empowering Bracelet, because Arrow Storm as well. Yes, that's correct. Because our gear basically for a lot of these fights is very minimal. Like we are geared to basically be barely able to survive pretty much most attacks. And you're gonna want to heal them too. So if you don't put the second Empowering Bracelet on Tressa, she's gonna die. And you can actually get 2 encounters here as well. It's pretty rare though, but a nice indicator of if you're in a danger zone is if you get an encounter before hitting the cat's eye chest. So we're gonna start chapter 3 here, and so you're gonna want a bare minimum of around, I think, 88,500 for this. If you went out of your way to grab extra money, you're gonna have a lot more. So I'm gonna sell just all the items here. But I'm guaranteed to have enough because I'm baller. But if you're lacking on money, you can also unequip these quartz rods on Ophilia and Cyrus, and that's another 1,200 that you can get. So pretty convenient, but you don't need it. And also I forgot to grab an M Noble Court, but I recently added some new scripts to handle different cases for the Thief Shrine fights, so it's like even more safer. There's only very few specific cases where you're kind of screwed. But if you follow this as a newbie, most of the fights are pretty much guaranteed, and yeah. So another check here. You want a bare minimum of 1 L stone and 2 M stones, which the 2 M stones you get by default from looting the chest in Gold Shore as well as here. But if you're lacking on soulstones, there's some couple extra ones you can get. You can get 1 here in Noble Court. this lady here. It's a 6% chance, but if you fail it, I mean, it sucks, but nothing you can do. You can also grab another money item here, which is another 9.5k. Very nice if you fail to scrutinize, especially Cyrus's do his job. And you can also get another M stone, or another Thunder L and M here from Tony's mom here if you go to Ripple Tide. It's not ideal because it takes time to grab these items, but that's rude. But okay. Alright, well, so that's another L stone here that you can get. So generally, yeah, we missed 3 Fire Blasts. Pretty unfortunate, but generally, there's lots of places where you can get extra soul stones here. You can even grab soul stones from Grandport here, so I'll just show you. If you're like that desperate for extra soul stones or whatever. But you should never ever have to come to this case, but if you do buy soul stones from Grandport, you're gonna need to grab some extra money items at a minimum here, because these soul stones here cost quite a bit more. So they cost 7.4k instead of the usual 6k. But here we're just gonna progress through the story here. Self-explanatory stuff. Just running around here. So Ulfi is really nice for extra money items, because I wasn't kidding about extra money items. So if you're like really low on money, you can actually grab the chest up there, which contains a Giant's Club, and then you can teleport out to Whisper Mill, and it'll sell for 16k. So that's a lot of extra money in your bag, especially if you somehow fail the 100 scrutinizes, but we don't need that, so we'll be moving on here, so. This one's another screen where you can get an encounter. It's kind of uncommon, but just to show you how bad it is to get encounters in here in general, I'm just going to force an encounter here, just to demonstrate. After I get to the save point here, if I do. So yeah, it's actually pretty... So this is a level 45 area, which means it's pretty common here to get ambushed. But thankfully, this is one of the easier encounters to break here. But generally, we're going to see why we should never ever use regular attacks on these normal mobs, or just try not to. But these mercenaries, 100% accurate. And these mushrooms are weak to Holy, but I'm just going to demonstrate to you why you're not accurate. Never mind. Alright, well... Apparently, Ophilia decided to be accurate, but by the way, spells are also 100% accurate. So that's another good thing to know. So spells like Trade Winds, Light, or any of Cyrus's spells, even Soul Stones. Like, even Soul Stones, you can use them to break. Like, you generally just don't want to use Soul Stones in general, especially in single story, but in a pinch, they're there, so. Let's see if I can miss. Alright, well, I guess everyone's a gamer, but... So once you break them, you're home free. I'm gonna heal again. And especially if you're new, you still kind of want to save, because things can get... Because this first fight coming up here is not Matthias, but it is still pretty infamous. So just to do a check here, one final check, that you would not do in a regular speedrun, you want 2M, 1L, 1L still minimum. And make sure you have empowering bracelets on everyone, because if you don't, you're going to regret it. So once you grab that, so one thing to also note, if you made a save, if you save and reloaded, and you grabbed 30k, you did the fight and you died in some case, don't forget to grab the 30k chest again, because you basically saved before you got the 30k chest. And I've seen that mistake plenty of times. So pretty self-explanatory fight. So ideally you want Ophi last, but they matter here. Or you want a staggered turn order so you can get heals in, but you're just gonna spam mercs to break them. The longer categories deal with this a different way, but this is the way you deal with it. So these guys can throw souls. These guys have a chance to throw soulstones at you, and if there's 2 soulstones thrown at you, you're dead, and there's nothing you can do about it. Just deal with it and move on. And also, notice I got the monster perfume there, and that's going to be relevant here in a second. Especially if you want to do rapid menuing. If you need to throw soul stones, rather. So I'm going to demonstrate my new script here. So this script, as you see here, if you notice the first turn here, we have a staggered turn order, which means that Matthias has one action, then one of our party members goes, and then he has another action after that. So if he uses attack first, we can use an alternate script here, which guarantees a safe kill, even though it's a little longer here. So, but Cyrus is first here. We're just gonna take the action of using Blizzard first. And one thing to note, in the regular script, either Ophilia or Cyrus can break on turn 2, so it's generally interchangeable. You can change this fight up a little bit, but generally for beginners, you'll probably just stick with one general script, but when you get more experience, you'll want to think about like how you can make the fight a little different but more efficient, or like essentially achieve the same thing. Because the general premises of this fight is that you get armor corrosive, you spam 2 vets on turn 3 and turn 5. So now that I see that I have a kind of like unsafe turn, he used attack first. So we're gonna go with the alternate script here. So we're actually going to, instead of just defending with Ophilia here like you would in an optimal fight, you would Reflective Veil Tressa here. And notice that my cursor immediately went to Tressa because she took a hit. So I believe Reflective Veil acts as like a healing, or has a similar cursor mechanic as like healing, where if there's someone that was damaged, it would automatically target them instead. So this provides me insurance in the case that Tressa was targeted again with Consuming Darkness, because you can't, cover only applies to regular attacks and not magical attacks, so. As you see there, we predicted that. And after turn 1, this fight is completely scripted, so. Now we're gonna do the alternate turn order here. I'm gonna have Tressa be the one breaking. You can use sword here, but I use mercenaries out of habit. So one thing to note here is that when you're using soulstones and you got a monster perfume, you want to be really careful here if you use an accidental monster. So I have an extra turn order here, so I'm just gonna demonstrate to you here in a second just why it's a bad idea. Because this monster perfume heals Matthias to full. That's why it's really bad. So this alternate script here, it's gonna throw a soul stone. We're just gonna Reflective Veil Tressa again, because she's the only one that took hits. Gonna cast Armor Corrosive. And from there, the fight is pretty self-explanatory, so we're still gonna break the same way as we did with the usual script here. So the only thing special about this particular script is that when we break Matthias with Ophilia, everyone needs to be at full BP, so since we don't need... So if you... In some weird case where either Cyrus or Tress is going to be at full BP, you can use Tress's turn, which is like an empty turn, to pretty much just like palm L yourself. Or palm M yourself, or just like throw some bad BM Soulstone or something. You can do whatever you want with Tress's turn. In this particular script, Tressa does nothing on turn 3, on turn 4. It's okay, Audrey, there's always VODs. So yeah, you'll notice why I'm like rapid firing bets. They're always in the same spot. And this fight is pretty much scripted. I don't remember if Matthias overheals here. But if you want insurance, you can just throw another stone. But it's guaranteed. It's a guaranteed kill. And that's it. So you're gonna skip through one cutscene here. Two cutscene, and that's pretty much it. So hopefully this tutorial was at least best explained as possible. I kind of tried to go through the route from my view. This isn't really like a tutorial kind of thing, so like I didn't explain like everything, but I explained everything as if I tried to kind of like... There's like actions that are obvious, but there's like a lot of kind of like nuances. Especially when you want to become a better speedrunner. So it's better when Matthias uses Consuming Darkness first, because that means that you're guaranteed for cover to proc. Because when he does Consuming Darkness first, his second will always be a regular attack. And since Ophi and Tressa both have cover, and cover comes to effect when someone's in a critical HP, so our gear is such that Consuming Darkness always throws you into critical HP, whoever gets hit. So that means that if Matthias were to target the same person again, you would cover would come into effect, and either Ophilia or Tressa, whoever applicable, would take the hit. And that makes it so that everyone survives Matthias. So Monster Perfume is just like a regular item. It's always at the bottom of your item screen. So I have time to do like one quick run with the Thief Shrine route as like a demonstration. We kind of didn't get to see Whistlewood and like a lot of encounters, unfortunately, so I'll try to do another run and see like how it goes. Yeah, so it's just basically like you gotta be careful. Like you can't just like rapid fire the Soulstone at the bottom. Yeah, you're just used to like rapid fire Soulstone, but with that it's at the bottom, and if you heal Matthias, especially if you like had damaging items on him, you are in trouble. No worries, Audrey. Thanks for joining in. Alright, I'm gonna close this because I don't want to sit through 8 minutes of credits, but I will also show more of the item order here. It's more apparent in longer categories. I have a spare save here with some. Actually, let me move this to. Wait. Just in the place where you all can see it. Because the other half isn't important, but. So let's just say I have the save here. So in Ophilia Single Story, we don't have many items, but in a full game category like this, you're gonna have a lot more items. So let me take off evasive maneuvers on people, cause get into battle here. So if you want this image to save this image for whatever reason, I can post it and. But well, you can look at it, but here, let me try to make this smaller so you can see here why understanding the item order is important. So if we follow this. Also, if you press Y here, I think it's Y, you don't see the item descriptions. I'm just gonna turn it off for the purposes of this, but you can see why there's a very certain item here. So we have our healing grapes, bunches here, plums, palms, jams, whatever our future fresh revitalizing gem will be, our olives, our herbs, any poison dust bottles, and then our soulstones. So memorizing this will basically be another key in a lot of categories, because knowing your item menuing is extremely important. So I just wanted to show that off to you, and you'll see it be the same way in menus too. So it's not applicable to most categories, but when you have fortifying or like any type of damage boosting nut, they also appear in the exact same order. Same thing with weapons too. So this will always be at the top of the items you equip, for example. There's a general order here, but I don't have a good save to show off important item orders, so you'll have to take my word for it. So I'll do an example run here, and I'll try to explain as much as I'll try to explain a little less because I'll be busy focusing running, but this will basically combine everything together that I explained.